Matthew 13, we're going to be looking at the parable of the weeds. Parable of the weeds. So we're going to look at a couple things here. So I'm going to spend a minute. We're going to read through the whole thing, kind of get the whole story in our heads and the explanation that Jesus gives. And we're going to kind of look at some things. But I'm going to walk through it like I normally do, verse by verse, but I want to get it in our heads first. So we just finished the parable of the sower. Remember, the farmer's out sowing the seeds. It falls in 4 different kinds of places. And last week we finished that up talking about the fruit of the Spirit. After Jesus told that parable on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, try to say that fast, shore of the sea. He collects seashells by the seashore. So he's in a boat. There's possibly a few thousand people on the shore, and he tells the parable of the sower. And then he also tells this parable of the weeds. And if you'll remember, in the parable of the sower, some of the disciples go to Jesus after he tells the stories. This is later on, and they ask, "What does that mean?" Of course, Jesus gets excited when people come to him and say, "We want to understand what you said." And he explains the parable to him. And today's parable is the same thing. He tells the parable. The crowds, you're like, "Well, okay, whatever. We're not sure what that meant, but okay." And then some of the disciples go to him and ask for an explanation. So these parables are similar, but they're very different at the same time. So this has a lot of questions that we need to look at. So here's the questions that Jesus is going to be addressing. So it's the parable of the weeds and the wheat, right? So here's the questions. Why are there weeds? Good question, huh? Why are there weeds in God's field where he's planting wheat? What should be done about it? Who should do it? And when's it going to be done? Aren't those all questions that we have? All right. Now, I know you're probably not thinking literally weeds and wheat, and that's not literally what Jesus is talking about. All of these represent something, and we'll dig into that. But these are the questions we're going to deal with today. Why are there weeds? In other words, why is God's kingdom not fully and finally realized on this earth yet? Why are there still weeds in his kingdom? Why are there still evil people? Why are there still people who are running from God? Why are there weeds? You get what I'm saying? And then if there are weeds, then what should we do about that? And should we do something, or is God going to do something? Who should do it? And then by God, when's it going to happen? Isn't that what we're all kind of thinking? Like, it's been 2,000 years. How long are we going to let these weeds grow? Which is easy to think that way if you don't think you're a weed. That's one of those things where you say it and you didn't plan to say it, so just take that for what it is. Okay, so let's do this. Let's read the parable. We're going to read the story. We're going to jump down to the explanation. So we're in Matthew 13, verse 24, and then after we read it, we'll jump down to verse 36 where Jesus explains it. Okay, everybody there? I want you to actually be reading this along with me, okay? Because I'm not going to show you the whole parable on the screen yet. All right? So, verse 24, he put another parable before them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared." So what's the parable about? This is where you answer the question. What is this parable about? The kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is like, or may be compared to. Okay? To a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. It's a wonderful enemy, huh? They just come mess up your field and then check out. Verse 26. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house, they came and said to him, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds?" And he said to them, "An enemy has done this." So the servants said to him, now listen closely, "Then do you want us to go and gather the weeds?" But he said, no. That's how the Greek reads. No, absolutely not. Lest in gathering the weeds, you root up the wheat along with them. Are you tracking? This parable is awesome. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. And that's exactly what it would have felt like when you heard that story on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus just ended right there. And everybody was like, okay. Not sure what that means. Not sure what Jesus is getting at here. He just told a story about seed falling in all these different places, and now there's weeds messing up the seed, and apparently some enemy has done this. Wonder what that means. And most of the crowd just stopped right there. Okay, well, good story, Jesus. But they're waiting on a miracle, or they're waiting on something interesting. They're waiting to be entertained. So they don't go to Jesus and ask what the explanation is. Verse 36. Then he left the crowds. Okay, so he gets out of the boat and checks out. He leaves the crowd standing there and went into the house. That's most likely Peter's house, or somewhere like that. And his disciples came to him. Now, when you see his disciples, that doesn't always mean the 12, because Jesus has more than 12 disciples. Now, he had 12 that were his closest disciples who spent every moment with him. But he also had a larger group that was called disciples, followers of him, and then there were the crowds. You see that distinction? So there's the 12, there's disciples, possibly 100 maybe, and then there's thousands called the crowds. The crowds are just kind of like checking it out, not sure what to think. The disciples are actually following him where he goes, but they don't spend all their time with him. But the 12 live with Jesus wherever he goes. Got it? So you see that distinction there. So we don't know if it's the 12 or the 12 and more, probably more, came to him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. Which is exactly what I would have done. When Jesus would get out of the boat and leave the crowd, I'm going with Jesus. I don't get the story. I got to understand. I'm that kind of person. All right, you can hear a story and go, wow, that's cool. I got to know every detail of what it means. That's just how I think. So that's what these people are doing. Explain to us this parable of the weeds of the field, because it sounds like you were saying something important there. Right? And he answered, so here's the explanation. The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. Who's the Son of Man? That's Jesus. It's his favorite title to use of himself. This comes all the way from the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, where Daniel sees a vision of heaven and thrones were set up, and one that looked like a son of man, so a human one, appears in heaven, and he's presented before the Father, God the Father. And he's given this Son of Man is given a kingdom. Daniel sees all this in a vision. So this is hundreds of years old, this idea. It's a prophecy that a human-like one would come and be given God's kingdom. See that? So the one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age. Now, at this point, you would be going, okay, Jesus, slow down. You're throwing a lot at us, right? But he says the harvest is the end of the age. Now, it's not the end of the world. You need to understand that. If your translation says the end of the world, they mistranslated the word. The word here is not cosmos, which would be translated in English world. The word here is aeonos, which is like the end of a period of time, the end of the age, okay? I don't have time to explain all that, but the Son of Man, verse 41, will send his angels, this is at the end of the age, will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers, and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. Oh, we got a lot to talk about, right? Isn't this an interesting parable? So here's what we'll do. I got to turn the text down. The text is like so big, I'm not that blind. Let's see here. Yeah, that's better. All right, sorry. I'll get my technology going here in a second. Okay, so here's what we'll do. Let's walk through this parable. This parable is extremely important for a lot of reasons. So the parable's about the kingdom, okay? The kingdom of heaven is like, and he presents this story. And he's talking about their present time and the future. He's talking about godly and the ungodly. He's talking about what's going to be done and who's going to do it. Did you notice the distinction in the parable? Who's trying to do the job of harvesting? The servants. And what does he say to the servants? No. Stop it. Okay? So let's walk through it line by line, and I'm going to help us understand. And listen, I realize that I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you in a somewhat short amount of time. And it's okay to stop and go, I don't understand that, and ask a question. It's okay to do that, okay? But I'll try to get us out of here pretty quickly. So he put another parable before them. The kingdom of heaven could be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. And while his men were sleeping, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. Okay, so the good seed in the explanation is the sons of the kingdom, right? That's what he explained to us. And the weeds, apparently, are the sons of the evil one. Okay? So he's planting good seed, and there are these weeds. And the servants want to do something about the weeds. You ever been in that position where you just like, God, I want to help you out a little bit, all right? You're letting way too much stuff go down here. But we can help you. If you were here last week, we talked about being a sheriff or a farmer. You can be a sheriff or a farmer. Which one are we supposed to be? Farmer, right. Farmer, he carries around a bag of seeds, and he's planting seeds of the kingdom. A sheriff carries around a gun with a bunch of bullets in it, and he walks around straightening everybody out. And if need be, he'll just shoot you in the head and be done with you, right? That's the sheriff mentality. In God's kingdom, we are not called to be sheriff. Amen? Okay, we're farmers. All right, so in this story, there's weeds coming up in the wheat. And we want to do something about that. That's a problem. We want to do something about it. But he says to them, you can't do that. You can't do that. Now, here's why. This is a picture of what we're talking about. Which one of these is wheat and which one's a weed? Hard to know, huh? This is the picture he's talking about. See, when the weeds and the wheat are first growing, you can't tell the difference. So apparently, he says, the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also, and the servants come to the master and say, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Why are there weeds? Okay. Well, Jesus says, well, an enemy has done this. So the field is the world. All right. Now, who does the world belong to? Okay, who made the world, guys? Yeah. In the beginning, God. Yes, it's his world. Okay. Now, the world is under the power of the evil one at this moment. At the cross, very much changed the game on that. But so the enemy comes in and he's put weeds. And the servants go, okay, guess what? We can do something about this. We can pull these weeds. And the master says, absolutely not. It's very emphatic in the Greek. And it's got an accent on it. So it's like an exclamation point. No, absolutely not. Do not go out there and start plucking weeds. Why? Well, because if you do that, you're not good at telling the difference. So you see what Jesus is saying here? Here's what Jesus is saying to us today. Let's take it into our day, all right? You're not good at telling the difference between the sons of the kingdom and the sons of the evil one. Now, you think you are, and sometimes I think I am. Are we all honest with ourselves this morning? But Jesus says you're not. You're not good at this. You're not good at telling the difference. Now, granted, this parable causes a struggle with us because we're like, but I really think I'm good at it. I really think I can tell the difference. I mean, when I look at that picture, clearly, this has got stuff on it. That's got to be the wheat. When you look at that picture, and if you can see that far, you can think, yeah, well, it's clear that the one on the left, that's got to be the wheat. But here's the thing. When they're first coming up, it looks like this. It all looks the same. It's only till later in maturity that you could tell the difference. But even then, the servants aren't doing the harvesting, are they? See, it's not our job to go around trying to tell the difference between who belongs to God and who doesn't, who's in and who's out. Apparently, in Jesus' opinion, we're poor judges of that. See how heavy this parable is? But it's so needed. Because let me tell you what I see every single week. There's a lot of Christians, we'll use that term loosely, that think it's their job to tell the difference. You've seen this, right? How many of you watched the show The Chosen? You ever seen that? Okay, listen to me. Listen closely. Download the Chosen app and watch that show. You download it on the app. If you've got a smart TV, you can AirPlay it or whatever to your TV and watch it there, or just watch it on your computer, whatever. I don't care what you've got to do. Go watch The Chosen show. There are 2 seasons. Season 2 is about to finish up. Go start at the beginning or you'll be really confused and watch the whole show. You owe it to yourself to see what it was like to be around Jesus through the eyes of his followers. It's extremely well done. The reason I'm telling you that is because the guy who's making that show, and he's doing a brilliant job with it, and Christians are attacking him every day. And you go in the comment section and they're all fighting about, well, I don't think this part of his theology is correct, and I don't think he's really a believer because all of his theology is not perfectly in tune with mine, right? And there's all these people on there acting just like these servants. Oh, we can do something about this. We can weed the field. And Jesus would come on the scene and go, no, this is not your job. You are poor judges of sorting the wheat and the weeds. This is so important, y'all. This is so important. There's a reason why he told this parable. He wanted his disciples to know it's not your job. It's not your job to judge. It's not your job to sort out who's in and who's out. Do you get it? Are you tracking with it? So this enemy, and who's the enemy? Is it Satan? Yeah, Satan. The devil. He's the one coming along and he's planting his own seeds. But you notice how slick he is? He just shows up in the night when everybody's asleep, nobody's paying attention, nobody's standing out in the field, and he plants the seeds alongside the wheat. And then what does he do? He leaves. Because that's just like him. I like to think of him as a seagull, just swoop and poop. That's what he does. He just swoops into your life and into your family and makes a big mess of things, and then he's gone. He don't even stick around to fight about it. But see, when we as believers get full of the Holy Spirit and we start to learn how to pray against him and how to tell him he's got to leave, we actually become the offense. See, and listen to me. The enemy has nothing on you. He has no claim on you. All he can do is mess with you. That's it. He can't take your salvation from you. He cannot take the Holy Spirit away from you. The only thing he can do is take the sinful desires that you've already got in your heart and put some things in front of you and get your desire to combine with that temptation, and it gives birth to sin, which James says is a stillborn baby. It gives birth to death. That's all he can do. He has no authority over you, and listen to me, he does not tell you who you are. Now, he'll lie to you, and if you believe him, you'll wreck your life. But he has no claim on you. It's not his field anymore. You get what I'm saying? So Perry, Florida, does not belong to the enemy anymore. Who does it belong to? It belongs to the king and the sons of the kingdom. You're not nearly as excited as you should be right now, okay? So these servants, and look, you got to give it to them. They're eager to help. We want to help. There's weeds. There's an enemy who came and put weeds in the field. We want to do something about that. We want to help. Let us go pull the weeds. And the master says, you can't do that because you'll mess it all up. Now, what is the reason why? What is the reason why he says not to pull the weeds? Because you're going to root up the weed along with them. So when we try to sort out who is in the kingdom and who's not, we end up damaging the people in the kingdom. Do you get it? This is a brilliant story. Jesus is so smart. It's almost like he created all this to make an illustration. He says, look, when you go try to sort this out, you're going to damage my kids. You're going to try to go sort everybody and label everybody here. You're a weed and you're a weed. Well, you don't believe the same theology I have, so you're a weed. And you listen to that kind of music, you must be a weed. Oh, you gave a lot. Well, you're a weed, clearly. When we start doing all that, what do we damage? The wheat. Do you see the point he's making? Okay, so think about this. The creator of the universe, who, if you read the whole biblical story, has went through all kinds of stuff trying to get people back to himself. Went to great lengths over and over and over to the point where it took sending his only son to go win people back for himself. And then he does all of that, and then we go, oh yeah, I can be the judge of this. I can sort this out. Like we're going to help him with that. And when we do that, we damage his people. Now, in the Old Testament, Israel were his people, his chosen people, because he wanted to use them to get to the rest of the world, right? He uses Israel to bring about Jesus, which brings about salvation to everybody, right? Okay, so in the Old Testament, he told his people this. He said, I will bless them that bless you, and I will curse them that curse you. When people come against you, they're coming against me, so I'm coming against them. That's how it was in the Old Testament. Now, who's the people of God today? Anybody who puts their faith in Jesus. That doesn't discount Israel. They're still included if they believe in Jesus, right? So you and I are the sons and daughters of God, right? So when we go pulling weeds and we damage his kids in the process, how do you think he's going to respond to that? I don't think he would like it much. I mean, he's very emphatic. No, don't do that, because if you do that, you're going to mess up my people in the process. When you think you're pulling a weed, you're going to pull a weed that's right next to the wheat, and their roots are mingled together now, and you're going to pull both of them up. And by the way, you don't know how to tell the difference. Now, here's the thing. I know that some of you right now are thinking, and if you're watching this on the internet, you're thinking this. But wait a minute. Didn't Jesus say we will know them by their fruits? We can judge people by their fruits. Didn't Jesus say that? Well, let's just go ahead and deal with that. Sound good? Turn over to Matthew 7, because that's where he says it, okay? We're just not going to be on the screen, so you just have to actually use a Bible. I know it's archaic to have pages and stuff. So Matthew chapter 7, verse 15. That's the verse you're arguing from, even though this is a hypothetical argument that I'm making you have. You say, okay, wait, can't we judge people by their fruits? Didn't Jesus say that? Right? Well, let's be clear. It says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Now, is he talking about everybody here? Are we going to recognize everybody by their fruits or false prophets? False prophets. So there's a few things you got to understand here. The context is not everybody in this verse. In Matthew 7, he talks about several groups of people. In this passage, he's talking about false prophets. Now, you might, I know what you're thinking if you're good at arguing, okay? That's okay, because I'm real good at it too, all right? But here's what we think. Okay, yeah, but we could, if a person's saying they're a believer, but they don't act like they're a believer, isn't that a false prophet? No, that's not what Jesus is talking about. Remember, this is before the cross. This is before the resurrection. This was before the idea of people trusting in Jesus for salvation. He's still teaching them about the kingdom. He hasn't done all the other stuff yet. So in this, he's talking about literal prophets. They come to you dressed like a sheep, but on the inside, they're actually a wolf. These are people who are intentionally trying to deceive you. That's a false prophet. Now, how would we recognize them? Look at the results of their life. So I'll give you an easy example. When you see somebody on TV or the internet, and they say to you, God told me, and then they give you this information, and then the end of that is, you need to give me money. That's false prophet. It's clear in Scripture that they don't do what they do for selfish gain. A true prophet is not in it for the gain. Okay? So when they say, well, God told me all this, and they say all this, and they take all these passages out of context, and then they say, now, the next thing God told me is you to send me $1,000. Right? The comedian Ron White has a funny joke about this. I'm not encouraging you to go watch him. I'm just saying it is funny. Okay? He's sitting on a beanbag chair, anyway, eating Cheetos, right? And the guy looks at him through the TV and he's like, are you sitting on a beanbag chair eating Cheetos? And he's like, oh, yes, sir. And he's like, do you have the urge to send me $1,000? He goes, close. Right? I mean, look, that's an easy, silly example, okay? This passage, though, is about false prophets. These are people who are intentionally trying to deceive God's people. You'll recognize them by their fruits. What kind of fruit do they have? Selfish gain, greed, usually riches, right? All those people that are false prophets that you see on TV or on the internet or wherever it is, and they're living in multi-million-dollar mansions and got several of them, and they're staying in hotels that cost $30,000 a night. That's a false prophet all day. And if you're on the internet and that offends you, good. We need to get a little bit smarter about who we're listening to, okay? So this is about false prophets. You will recognize them by the results of their life, okay? Now jump back up to verse 1 of chapter 7, and what does it say when he's talking about everybody? It's the first two words. Judge not. Why? That you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, that's how you'll be judged. And with the measure you use, in other words, the the way that you measure your judgment or you measure another person, the standard that you use for them, it'll be measured back to you. So if you're judging somebody and you're calling them a weed and you're basing that on some very frivolous things that you just don't like about them, that's how you'll be judged. People love to quote this verse. Oh, Jesus said don't judge. Did you read the rest of it? He said you better be careful with your judgment because how you judge people is how I'm going to turn it back on you. Does that scare you? It's pretty scary to me. This is the passage I think of when I do have a judgmental thought towards somebody. I go, oh, wait a minute. Do I want to stand before God and him use that same standard against me? Nope, sure don't. All right, I got it. I'll stop that. So the context is, are we allowed to judge who's a wheat and a weed? Well, Jesus said, you're not good at that. You're not good at it. So why would you spend your time trying to figure out who's in and who's out? That's not your responsibility. It's not your job. It's not our job to go around judging everybody. And if you do, it's going to get turned back on you. And he goes on to say, why are you looking at a speck in someone's eye when you've got a light pole sticking out of your head? All right? Okay, so we killed that argument, right? Well, Jesus said we can recognize them by their fruit. Well, he's not talking about everybody. He's talking about people who are obviously false prophets. Okay? All right, so here's the question. All right, there's wheat that God's planted, and there's sons of the kingdom. That guy's so cool on that motorcycle. There's sons of the kingdom, and then there's sons of the evil one. They're on his team. So there's people on God's team, there's people on his team. Got it? And they're growing up together. He says, all right, so if we can't go out there and pull the weeds, then what are we going to do? You're going to struggle with this if you're not a patient person. Let both grow together until the harvest. Does that aggravate you a little bit? You're like, oh man, really? Okay, so this is what Jesus says. The Son of God, he says, do nothing. What do we do about the weeds, Jesus? Nothing. You let them grow. You let them grow. This would be the point in the story where the people listening would have been like, wait, that's not good gardening, Jesus. But the people who had planted wheat before knew, you don't go pull the weeds. You'll pull the wheat up too. So they're tracking with him. So let both grow together. Until when? How long do we have to put up with the sons of the evil one? Until harvest. Jesus gives us no help here. He's like, what do we do? What do we do? Something's got to be done. No. Let them grow. Let them grow. What's interesting about this is this is told to us several times in different ways in the scripture. At the end of the book of Daniel, which, by the way, all of these elements Jesus is pulling from the book of Daniel. The fiery furnace, the Son of Man, the angels as harvesters or reapers, all of these ideas he's pulling from the prophet Daniel. Okay, and anybody listening who was familiar with the Old Testament, which was most of them, they would have been tracking, oh, he's quoting from Daniel. Oh, he's the Son of Man. He's saying he's the Son of Man. He's saying he's the one that's going to send out the angels to harvest at the end of time, or the end of the age. So he's pulling all this from Daniel. And in Daniel, at the end, it says that the angel tells Daniel, seal up your prophecy, because this is for a time way in the future. You won't even be alive when it happens, Daniel. So seal up this prophecy and let the evil ones continue to do evil and the righteous continue to be righteous. Now, if you flip to the end of your Bible in Revelation, the very end, he tells John the same thing. But he says, don't seal up the words of this prophecy because the time is near. And he goes on to say, let the evil one still do evil and the righteous still be righteous. What does he mean? Quit trying to sort it out. The ones who don't want to follow Jesus let them not follow Jesus. Now, does that mean you don't try to win them over? You don't go tell the gospel to them? That's not what it means. It just means it's not your job to go make them stop doing evil. It's not your job to sort everybody out. Let it grow. If you've seen the Lorax movie, you have the song in your head now. Let it grow, let it grow. A lot of Christians are singing let it die, but anyway. So let it grow, let them grow together until the harvest. At the harvest time, I'll tell the reapers. Oh, wait a minute. Not the servants? I thought the servants were the ones that wanted to harvest. Well, in Jesus' story, there's a different group called the reapers. Okay, so imagine this. The servants then are people who help plant the seeds. That's their job. They plant the seeds. Then there's another group called the reapers or the harvesters. So the servants plant, but they don't harvest. They plant, they don't sort, they don't harvest, because what you would do is you'd pull up the whole field and then you would sort out the wheat from the weeds. Literally a darnel wheat. So you would sort that out. The servants in Jesus' story don't do any of that stuff at the end. Their job is to help plant seeds. Do you see it? So who are we in the story? We're the servants, and we're hopefully the wheat. We're the sons of the kingdom. So the servants, what are we supposed to be doing? Well, we scatter seed. We help plant seeds. We don't harvest. We don't sort. We don't make judgments. He says, just wait, just let it grow. Let some people not be Christians and other people are going to be Christians. Some are going to be true disciples of Jesus and some may not be. But you won't be able to tell the difference very well. You're not good at that. Because they look very much alike. So you mean people who, in our opinion, don't seem like they belong to God or that they're saved, as we like to say, people that don't look always like they're saved could actually be saved and we just don't realize it? Is that what Jesus is saying? Yeah. Here's what that means. This is the only thing it can mean. There will be people in heaven that you thought wouldn't make it. I think we're going to be so surprised. We're going to get there and go, wait a minute, she got in? And Jesus is going to say, well, yeah, you think when I hung on the cross it was only for you? You're going to look and go, wait a minute. Somebody's going to be walking in, you're going to be like, oh, surely not. And if that's what you're thinking in that moment, you might be the one that gets turned away. See, we've been convinced to think that only the really, really good people belong to Jesus. But I've been reading this thing a lot, and he seemed to hang out with all the people that the religious people said weren't getting into the kingdom. And he actually looked at the religious people in Matthew chapter 23, and he said, by the way, you Pharisees, you shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. And by the way, you're not getting in because you won't allow them to get in. And a couple chapters later, they hang him on a cross for saying all that. See, Jesus is after the people you're not after. Jesus would hang out with people you won't hang out with. Most of the time, you won't hang out with them because you're scared of what your other Christian people will say about you for hanging out with them. You realize Jesus was called a drunkard and a glutton. Why? Probably because he went to parties where lost people were. We know he went to one. He went to Matthew's house. What was Matthew? A traitor, tax collector for the Romans, a Jewish tax collector for the Romans. And who was there? Who was at Matthew's house? People like Matthew. Tax collectors and sinners and prostitutes were there. Does that make you nervous? Makes me a little bit nervous, right? But that's who Jesus was after. He was after people that the religious crew was not after. So as servants, our job is to plant seeds. I'll give you, in case you're thinking, well, what if, I don't know if you're interpreting this right. What else does the Bible say about this? Well, I got some more scripture for you. Paul said this, therefore do not pronounce judgment before the time. What time do you think he's talking about? The end, when the judgment comes, harvest time, before the Lord comes. See, he tells you right there. Who will bring to light, Jesus the Lord, will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness, the things that we don't understand or see clearly. He's going to bring those things to light and will disclose or reveal the purposes of the heart. You want anybody to be around when he does that to you? Reveals the depths of your heart. Then each one will receive his commendation from God or approval from God. So what's Paul say? Based on what Jesus is teaching, Paul says, don't pronounce judgment. Don't make a deciding line of who's in and who's out before the time, when the Lord comes. Because when he comes, that's his job. So when I look out at people and I say, I think I can figure this out, they're not in, they're in, they're clearly not in, they're clearly in. Whose job are you taking? You've sat yourself on Jesus' throne. And I don't know how much of the Bible you've read, but there's quite a lot of people who tried that. The enemy who likes to plant weeds was one of them. He tried to exalt himself above the Most High, Isaiah and Ezekiel tells us. It didn't turn out so well, not going to turn out too well for him. So when we start casting judgment and deciding things before the time, we're trying to take Jesus' job. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to take his job. I actually like that it's his job and not mine. But see, I'll just be honest with you. We'll do a confession time. Okay, I'll go first. I've spent a lot of time following Jesus and trying to sort things out for him. And it's miserable. It is miserable. If you want to understand what freedom and rest is in God's kingdom, you just let God be who he is. And you just be who he made you to be. When you crawl up on his throne, you will only ruin yourself, and you'll ruin the rest of us in the process. Because if you pull the weeds, what do you damage? The wheat. So then they come to him and they say, okay, explain to us this parable. And that's when he really throws a lot at him at the same time. And we've already read it, so I won't spend too much time on this. But the field is his world, and the good seed are the sons of the kingdom, right? The weeds are the sons of the evil one. So apparently the evil one's got some kids too. I didn't plan on doing this, but I think we need to. Genesis chapter 3 tells us this. This is after the serpent has got Eve and Adam to eat the fruit and disobey God and define good and evil for themselves instead of listening to God. And here's what he tells the serpent. This is what God tells the serpent. I will put enmity or conflict, deep conflict, between you, the serpent, and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. So apparently the serpent laid some eggs somewhere. He's got kids too. And he tells him, you're the ones that you plant, the ones that you have as your kids, they're going to have problems with my kids. Now that sounds like bad news until you read this. And he, singular. Wait a minute, I thought offspring was plural. It's singular. He, that's Jesus, shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel. That would be the cross. See, the evil one has got people working for him. And Jesus has people working for him. And there's always going to be a conflict with those two groups. That's just how it's going to be. Until harvest day. And then he, not us, he is going to sort it all out. And some people you thought were weeds are going to be wheat, and some people you thought were wheat will be weeds. But it's not our job. See how powerful this story is? Jesus is brilliant. Because he's launching his kingdom in front of these people. And he goes, you know what? They need to understand how this works and how it doesn't work. Or they're going to turn out like a bunch of Pharisees. Like a bunch of little sheriffs, deputies running around like Barney Fife with one bullet in their pocket. I don't know if you've tried to be a sheriff. Not literally, I'm using a metaphor here. But you don't really have any bullets. I don't either. You think, well, I've got some ammo on them. You might want to be careful with that. With the measure that you use it, it will be measured to you. So you got one bullet, somebody else has got 85. You got one bullet, somebody else is a prepper, and they got a basement full of bullets. So I wouldn't be shooting that gun too much. I'd keep it in the holster. I'd turn your badge in if I was you. I gave mine up a couple years ago. I kind of had to. I gave my badge up. And it's so much better to be a farmer who plants seeds and goes to bed. And it grows and he doesn't understand how. We're going to get to that parable soon. So let's do some application here because I've made you listen for a long time. I do need to explain this though because the English is not quite as accurate as I'd like it to be. He says at the end, the Son of Man will send his angels, not his servants, his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers. Now this English is not as good as it could be. The word there for causes of sin, there is a word for sin in Greek, and it's not here. The word that normally is translated sin is not the word used here, so I don't think they should have translated it this way. I'm not knocking the translator. They're a lot smarter than I am, but sometimes they translate to make it easier to read, and sometimes that means not as accurate, all right? It's not a big deal. It's just how things go. The word used here is scandalon. That sounds like scandal or to be scandalized. That's why they translate it causes of sin. Okay, so what's he going to do? When he comes to do harvest time at the end of the age, the angels are going to be sent out. And what are they removing? They're removing people who spend their lives trying to get people to sin. You see that? So it's not that they're just everyday sinners because, by the way, who's just an everyday sinner? Let's all raise our hands, class. That's all of us. So if he's removing all sinners, then nobody's the wheat. So that's not what he's doing. It's people who are causing people to sin, causing scandals. Literally in Greek, it's scandal. So that's who he's weeding out. Now, the next line, you're like, wait a minute, though. It says all lawbreakers. Okay? Yeah, it does. It does say that. In the Greek, it means all people who make a path for lawlessness. It means they have no rules in their life. There's no guidelines. They do whatever they want, and they make a pathway. They plan it out ahead of time to go down that path, and they bring others with them on that path. That's who the weeds are. That's his description. So when the angels come at the end of the age, that's what he's doing. He's going to gather out of his kingdom. Why? Why is he going to gather these things out of his kingdom? Because he's making a new heavens and a new earth. At the end of time, this place is going to be remade. Not new as in completely new, like the old one was completely destroyed. It's going to be purified by fire, Peter said. It's going to be purified and made new. We're all going to be gathered, and this is going to be changed, and we're going to spend eternity on a new earth in a perfect kingdom. That's where we're going. That's good news. Here's what that means. It's not always going to be like it is right now. That's good news. Right? Because I don't know if you've paid attention, but things are not always great here. Things are rough. People get sick. We die. We have pandemics. We have full-blown evil and causes of sin going on. People actively trying to get us to walk away from God and do things that'll wreck us and our families and our friends. But it's not always going to be like that. So the question is, why does evil exist and why does he keep letting it grow? There's coming a day when he's going to fix it. But apparently, now's not the time. So I think I'll just agree with him and join him in just letting it go. Some people are going to be weeds, some people are going to be wheat, and it's not my job to decide. Right? Okay. Now, some of you are like, well, there's this fiery furnace thing. What's that all about? I think we all kind of know what that's all about. I think here's the interesting thing I found, though. Since he's pulling all these terms from Daniel, I went back and read the story of the fiery furnace and Shadrach, Meshach, and under the bed we go. That's what one of my professors calls them. I thought it was funny. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Now, if you know that story, they get thrown into the fiery furnace because they won't bow down to the king's statue. He set himself up as a god, and he wants everybody to bow down. And these guys are Israelites, and they're not about to bow down to another god, right? They were good Israelites. A lot of other Israelites didn't do that, but they did. They said, okay, we're not going to do that. We serve Yahweh alone. So they said, we'll throw you in the fiery furnace. We'll burn you alive. And they're like, okay. But that's fine if that's what you want to do, but we're not bowing down to your statue, all right? So they throw them in the furnace. And what happens? You know the story. You've heard it before. They don't get burned. They're like hanging out in the fiery furnace, walking around. And they look in, the king looks in and goes, I see one in there who looks like a son of man. He looks like a son of the gods. There's a fourth one in there. And it says, well, go get him, go bring him out. And the people who created that hell on earth, and getting them out, it killed those soldiers. The people who created the hell were themselves destroyed by the hell they created. I just wanted to give that to you. You can think on that as you want to. But here's what's awesome. Those three guys come out of the fire, and it says they didn't even smell like smoke. That's pretty cool, huh? Now you might think, well, I don't know if I believe that. Well, then I don't know what to do with you. Throw them into the fiery furnace. Now in that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now here's what I want you to understand about these, because in English we don't really get this. Weeping is a form of sadness. That's pretty obvious. Gnashing of teeth is anger and hatred. That's what that term meant. When Jesus said that phrase, he meant anger and hatred. There will be people there who are going to be sad that they got themselves where they are. And they're also going to be angry. Who they're going to be angry at? They're in a place they decided to be in because they rejected God. And God gave them what they wanted, which they didn't want anything to do with him. He'll give you what you want. It's a scary thing when he does that. When God gives you what you want, that's not always a good thing. So they're in a place that they ended up because they wanted to be there. They wanted nothing to do with God. He said, okay, I'm not going to force myself on you. You can not have anything to do with me. And they get there, and now they're still angry at him for being in a place they chose to be. So you're asking, well, who's going to end up in that place? Those kinds of people who wanted nothing to do with him, and he gives them what they want. But there's nothing in this passage saying we're supposed to decide who those people are. It's actually very clear it's not our job. He says, then the righteous will shine like the sun. This is a direct quote from Daniel 12, by the way. Will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. And then there's that phrase again. If you have ears, you should listen. The righteous will shine like the sun. I'll read you what Daniel says here. And those who are wise, he doesn't say righteous, he says wise. But in the Old Testament, those are pretty much synonymous. If you're wise, you're going to be righteous. You're going to do the right things. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn, look at this, and those who turn many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever and ever. That's us. We're doing everything that we can to turn people toward a right relationship with God. Righteousness is not morality. Righteousness is right relationship, which leads to doing the right things. See, if you just see righteousness as something you do, then you'll miss the point. The point is you have to get the relationship right so that you can do what's right. Because without the relationship, all you have is a sin nature to do what's wrong. But one day we will be fully righteous, literally. Right now, you are righteous spiritually. Here's why. When Jesus died on the cross and rose from the grave, when you put your faith in him, he says you were back there on the cross with him. Your old self died, you died, and you were raised to new life. And we symbolize that in baptism. When we baptize you, that's the story we're telling. You died and you've been raised to new life. Here's what that means. You have been declared righteous. The problem is you just don't believe it. Or you don't know it. You have been declared righteous. So when the enemy comes against you and goes, nah, man, you're a weed. You can say, no, I've been declared righteous. God said I was righteous because of Jesus. You're not righteous because of you. You're righteous because of him. That's his opinion of you. He would get on a cross so he could say that about you. That's how much he loves the sons and daughters of his kingdom. So what do we need to do? We'll hit these real quick and we'll be done. Judgment, consequences, and punishment of unbelievers are not our responsibility. Can we all agree? Okay, so being a family of people here, we need to understand this. Judgment, which means calling out who's what, forcing consequences on them, and punishing them is not our job. Especially when we're talking about unbelievers. That's not our job, okay? When we assume Jesus' role as judge, we damage everyone. So my application here is stop it. Just stop it. Just stop being a judge. You're not a judge. And if you are, I promise you're not good at it. But you're not a judge. Our role is just to scatter seed. Leave the results up to God. So if you're wondering, like, okay, so what is your role here leading this ministry? What are you actually trying to do? I'll tell you what I'm not doing. I'm not judging. And I'm not going to make you grow. Because I've already learned once, I can't. If I try to make you grow in your faith, I die. That's what happens to me. If I try to be a judge, I stay miserable. So here's what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to lead you to do every week. Scatter seed. Take the kingdom out there and scatter it all over the place. To everybody. To people you don't think will listen. To people that are distracted by the world. To people who look like weeds to you. Scatter the seed everywhere. And the enemy's going to come along and plant weeds right next to what you planted. And that's fine. Because one day, the Son of Man's coming back. And he'll take care of all that. So what's our job? Scatter seed. And then go to bed. Let's pray.